I'd like to tell you a story about two very, very beautiful women. These were young girls, and they lived many, many years ago with their family, with their mother and father and their brothers and sisters, right at the end of a thriving village. It was quite a large family, and the children were all sent out to work the land. The mother had told the eldest two girls, who were very, very beautiful, as I said, to look after the younger ones and to make sure they picked all the ripe fruit and vegetables. Because it was a large family, they needed the fruit and vegetables for the family meals. So off went the children to carry out their work, and the elder two sisters were observing and supervising. But pretty soon the elder two sisters started to quarrel, as siblings do. And they quarrelled and quarrelled. And what were they quarrelling about? Who was the most beautiful? Now here's the thing. These are the two most beautiful young women in the village. And in those days people used to get married very young, so they're expected to get very good husbands. But there's an element of competition between them, because which one's going to get the best husband? So they're arguing about which one is the most beautiful, and they can't agree, and they can't agree, and eventually they decide, right, they'll go to their dad. So they go to their dad and they say to their dad, which one of us is the most beautiful? But their dad, being a true gentleman, says, you know what, you're both absolutely gorgeous. You're both really beautiful, and I couldn't possibly choose between my own two daughters. But I'll tell you this, as beautiful as you two are, I think your mother's even more beautiful. Well, it was a very good answer, but it did not satisfy the girls. They still didn't know which one of them was the most beautiful. So they go back outside where they're supposed to look after their siblings and watch them picking the ripe fruit and vegetables for the meals later on. And they start bickering again, and the bickering gets worse. So now they decide there's got to be a way to solve this argument. They've got to find out which one's the most beautiful. So they decide that obviously if they go out and they go for a walk from one end of the village to the other, then one of them will get more attention and more glances, more approval, and that one will then be decided as the most beautiful. Seems like a good solution, but they're supposed to look after their little sisters and brothers. Now, how are they going to do this? Because they can't go out together. First of all, if they went out together, which they've done many, many times before, that although they get lots of glances, they don't know who's looking at who, which one of them the people are looking at. And secondly, they can't go out together because they're supposed to look after their brothers and sisters. But they decide they can go out separately, because then one of the girls will watch over the brothers and sisters, and the other one will go and walk from one end of the town to the other. But then, says one of them, well, what happens if you come back and you say, 1 million people have stared at you? How will I know if you're telling the truth? So they decide to take with them their next eldest sibling, who's a brother called Wisdom. So now Wisdom's in on this little argument, and he comes in as an independent adjudicator. He says, look, you're both my sisters. I can't say who's more beautiful. I think you're both lovely, but I don't really see you as beautiful. You're just my sisters. He says, I'm completely independent. I'll go with you, and I will count every person who looks at each one of you. And at the very end, and not until the end, when both of you have walked the walk, will I tell you which one has got the most admirers. Verity goes first, and she goes with her brother Wisdom, while the other sister looks after the younger siblings and checks that they're picking all the ripe fruit and veg. And Verity and Wisdom go walking off to the end of the village. As Verity and Wisdom are walking through the village, an unbelievable thing happens. People seem to be turning away, and some of them even go into their houses and close their curtains. It's a strange thing to do when there's such a beautiful girl around. And she thinks, I must be the ugly sister. Verity always thought that she was so beautiful. But then she thinks, well, actually, their father had said that she was equally beautiful as her sister, so that can't be the reason. She asks Wisdom, and Wisdom says, look, you are my sisters, I told you this, I just see you as who you are. Anyway, since nobody's looking at them and nobody's paying any attention to Verity, Wisdom starts up a conversation. He can't think of what to say, so he says, well, my name means clever, what does your name mean? And Verity said, my name means truth. And now they start to walk back through the village, back towards their house. At which point Verity thinks to herself, I'm going to have to do something quick, because nobody's given me any admiring glances. I haven't had any approval. I'm not going to win this thing. So she turns to her brother and she says, Wisdom, I want you to walk in front of me on the way back. And I want you to not look around, just keep going forward and keep your eyes on the other villagers and count if I get any admiring glances. Wisdom says, look, I'm not stupid, I know the rules. Yes, she says, but it's very important that you don't turn round. Okay, says Wisdom. He shrugs his shoulders and he walks ahead of her. He does what he's told and he doesn't turn round. She's his elder sister, and if there's one thing that he knows and he's been brought up to believe, is that you obey your elders. So as they're walking, the remaining villagers go into their houses, close the doors and the curtains. I mean, even the dogs and cats are going into their houses. No one's looking at Verity at all. Which is surprising, actually, because Verity has removed all her clothing. And of course, as soon as she did this, the last remaining people just went into their houses and closed the door. But of course, when she gets near to her house, she puts all her clothes back on. Behind her brother's back, obviously. There's no point in walking around naked. She might get into trouble with her family, and nobody's looking anyway. By the time she's got all her clothes back on, she then starts walking next to her brother. They go back in through the garden gate, and of course the mother doesn't even know that one of the girls has gone out. She goes back in, keeps an eye on her sisters and brothers, and Fantasia goes out with Wisdom. And lots of people are looking at her, and Wisdom says to her, Fantasia, my name means clever, and Verity's name means truth. What does your name mean? Does your name have a meaning too? And Fantasia said, yes, my name means imagination. Well, it's like storytelling. And now Fantasia notices that a lot of people are looking at her and smiling at her and appear to be giving her approval. But she says to Wisdom, look, a lot of people are looking at me, but they're not going to come over and talk to me because I'm talking to you, so would you mind? Ah, he says, yes, I know the thing. You want me to walk ahead. What Verity must have meant. She just wanted me to count. So he walks on ahead, and everybody appears to be looking at his sister. People are coming from everywhere to stare. People are coming out of their houses. At the end of the village, Fantasia turns round, walks back, and as they're approaching the house, Verity and the younger sisters and brothers can hear the crowd approaching the house, telling Fantasia how beautiful she is. So now it's time for Wisdom to tell them who's won. And he says, look, I have to be honest. Verity had nobody looking at her. And Fantasia, he said, even if you'd only got one person looking at you, you would have won because Verity had nobody. So Fantasia, feeling really sorry for her sister, takes off her cloak, wraps it round her sister's shoulders. And Verity, quite upset, says, I don't understand it. And Fantasia looks at her beautiful sister Verity and says, I don't understand it either. But Wisdom cuts in, well, I do. He says, come on, I'll show you. And they walk again to the end of the village, him and Verity, and everybody's looking. And Wisdom says, people don't like the truth. They especially don't like the naked truth. But once you wrap it up in the mantle of a story, it becomes fascinating.